Thanks for joining us. Me and Bishop Johnson, we're going to do our second installment of Secession Conversations. The first one we did about 3 months ago, and the last time I checked, it was around 400 or so people have viewed the video, and between that and some feedback that I've gotten from people both inside and outside the church, it seemed like people were blessed by it, and it helped some people. So me and Bishop said that we're going to at least have another one or two conversations around this, just kind of help the congregation and also help move the conversation along. I'm going to share a story to kind of get us started, to kind of set some context for today's conversation, and it comes out of an interview between a Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright and Frank Thomas. And Dr. Wright, he was a pastor. He was actually Obama's pastor. I think it's Trinity, United Church of God. No, I think it's Trinity, but I'm not sure about the whole name, but it's Trinity in Chicago. He was Obama's pastor, and now that church is pastored by Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, and he was being interviewed by Frank Thomas, who wrote a number of books of preaching. He is actually the founder of the first PhD program in Black preaching, and they were having a conversation, and he was talking with Jeremiah Wright about his succession from him being the pastor to his predecessor, his successor in Otis Moss III. And he said that it was such a gradual transition that he just started preaching less and less, and Dr. Moss started preaching more and more. And he said it was so gradual to a point where he couldn't even really remember exactly like his last time preaching at the church, because they just made it a nice, slow, easy transition. And thinking about that, I just want to see kind of how do you relate that story to where we are and to where you are, Bishop, as we kind of talk about the logistics of the secession and transition of the house of the Lord at this time.
Pastor Darren, I want to thank you for the opportunity to share and to talk about these important things. I think they're critically important to where we are, where we want to go, and how we want to go. Not just where, but the method and the methodology and the condition that adheres as we go there. We don't want to just end there all messed up and broken down. We want to arrive there healthy and with a proper perspective. So I think these are very critical. I thank those people who tuned into the first one, and hopefully the second one will be as good. I think that that story captures probably the essence of my heart, and that is that our transition is so subtle, so smooth, so healthy, that people won't even know what happened. It'll just be like, well, Pastor Darren's last Sunday, he said, it won't even be like, well, where was Bishop? Well, what happened? It will be a very smooth transition. And I think we're on our way to that. We're on our way to that by a number of things that I will touch on and we can talk about. One would be the fact that you're the lead pastor, and I've only had really one question about that. Now, somebody asked me, is that really what you want to say? Is that really, I don't understand. What does that mean? And basically what it means is the last time that I started to talk about retirement and people started reacting so negatively, I said, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to talk about retirement because people just seem that they were coming out of all kinds of bags, and if you want to retire, that'll be it for me, and I'm done. And I said, okay, hold up, let's rethink this. Let's not do that because that's just too negative. And so I just kind of thought about you handling the day-to-day activities. Not that I'm completely out, but out of most of those kinds of things. And when you do that, you create your own preaching environment, audience, because you are preaching into the lives of people that you have performed the marriage ceremonies, buried their loved ones, counseled them. You preach into that. And then as the founding, and I call myself the preaching pastor, you are the lead pastor, and really I could add on there, and you're the preaching pastor too. You're the lead pastor, but you also preach. I'm the founding pastor, and I do a great deal of the preaching, although we are in the transition where you are preaching about 3 months now out of the year. So I mean that's a quarter. That's not insignificant. That's not insignificant.
Yeah.
I mean, you're moving in there. You're moving in there. But that allows people then to begin to understand that there's a transition in place. We're working our way through that transition. What are the roles that we are attempting to adopt as we move through that transition? And then we can begin to evaluate how we're doing with that transition. I think it's going pretty good. I don't think people notice any different. When I'm gone, generally right now, a month at a time, I mean, I get the normal, when are you coming back? And then, and I tell them, jokingly, I'm 69 years old. I don't know. I'll be back sometime, but I just don't know when that's going to be right now. And they'd be like, well, you are coming back, right? Oh, yeah, I'm coming back. But I could stay. I don't know how long I'm going to stay. I might be, depending on how I feel. I might just be feeling vacation-y. I might just go on another week or so. I don't know. So I think that's good. I mean, I think that we want to have a transition that is so healthy and so subtle that if there's really no hard markers that we got to say, well, this is the day when we'll transition.
I was it's kind of, from my perspective, it was a funny story. It's funny, and it's also interesting when I remember when you had said, like, you were using the term lead pastor, and I wasn't quite sure if you were serious or not when you were initially saying it. And I remember we were doing the annual report, and you always have a letter that you would write at the end of the annual report, and I saw that you had signed it founder and preaching pastor, and I emailed you and I said, is this so that means I should start using lead pastor? And I remember we were talking on the phone, and your response was the greatest. You said, let's throw it out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I do think that, the fact that it wasn't, the response to that wasn't a whole lot of pushback or anything like that. I think it was I do consider it to be somewhat of a defining moment. One of the many defining moments for us, and by us, I mean me and you, but also us as the house of the Lord, as we walk through this together, what I mean? Because at the same time, we haven't been through this before, you know what I mean? So we're all experiencing this, for the first time together, which is significant also.
Darren, I like that terminology, the defining moments. How many defining moments will there be? We don't know. How long will they take? We don't know. Where will they be? Will they end? We don't know. I think we just allow them to blossom and to come to fruition in their own time and in their own way. I think that's very healthy. So not a defining moment. A defining moment for most folks in this situation will be, Bishop is retiring on January the so-and-so. We will have the ceremony and we will do, and I suppose that will come at some point, but it'll probably come after rather than before or during. We'd probably say, well, that really probably was his last sermon last year. So, as the founding and preaching pastor, then we'll come up with whatever term you're going to use for me after that, emeritus or gone but still here, or whatever we're going to say. Whatever we're going to say. I mean, I think it's great. And we talked about last time, let's just touch that a little bit, that a lot of churches don't do this well. And because they don't do it well, it leaves the church in all kinds of pain and confusion and not sure what's going on.
That's true. And it makes me think about, it was a video, me and you had both watched. It was some conversations of successors and their predecessors, and they were talking through some of the different, unique aspects of each of their contexts. And one said something that really surprising me, because he was the son, the biological son of the founding pastor. He grew up in the church, and even when he became when he stepped into the role of his father, he said that there is no good transition that is a quick transition. And if there was anyone that I would expect to say to be able to go with a quick transition, it would be someone in his situation, which for me was like, well, this means that we really need to take our time. If he's saying that, then we really
I would
need to
agree.
take our time.
Yeah, I would agree. There is a church in the city whose name shall remain unmentioned, and that in my opinion short-circuited the transition that they had planned, and that just threw the church into all kinds of difficulty and pain. The transition was supposed to be 3 years, and I think it ended up being, the pastor just came back after 6 months and said, "Oh man, everything's going so good. Let's just accelerate it. It's done." And oh my God, all kinds of stuff started happening. A transition takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And a good transition probably takes more time than that. So we're not in a rush to do anything. I get asked often, you probably don't know this, so it's just, is your successor on? Yeah, he's on. Is he working? I mean, he's there. But when do you think he won't get out? I don't know. I'm not sure. Just kind of, this is a great time of ministry for me, a time to preach, a time to just be very honest, to continue to put back for retirement. African-American preachers generally don't have much retirement. And that's something that people don't take into consideration. But for most of the time that we have been pastors, we have not even known anything about insurance or retirement. And so when Pastor Bill was pastor, he asked me one day, so what is your retirement package? I said, excuse me? Your retirement package. I said, what's that? He said, well, when you put together, I said, I don't really know what you're talking about. We don't have any retirement package. I mean, so what do you do? Well, African-American churches preach till you die. Yeah. And then that's it. Okay. So he said, well, can I turn you on to my financial planner? I said, sure. I need to figure out, I do want to retire one day. I mean, I don't want to preach till I die, but that means I got to start saving. I think I was about 40 something at that point. So that means 20 years of my saving is already gone with nothing put back. So that makes me late. It makes it difficult for me to really retire at the level that I've lived. So right now is a time when you have, at 69, you've paid most of your bills, you don't have a lot of stuff, so you're just putting money back, trying to prepare yourself for what's going to come, because it is coming when I will no longer be on the church payroll, and then I have to deal with whatever it is that I have saved.
That's it also makes me think about, like, when you talk about, like, when people ask you and you're like, well, I don't know. And, I get some of those same questions and I'm like, I don't know. And I think it speaks to some degree, I think what we're doing is even somewhat countercultural, because we're so caught up in trying to do something and accomplish something, and so goal oriented and timelines and deadlines. And we get so caught up in that, when in reality, our doing should come out of our being, and we're actually in a state of being, which I think is countercultural, and I think is sometimes hard for people to grasp, because it's so different from the way we function, just naturally being 21st century Americans.
Yep.
But we're being right now. We're being in this moment. We're being in this space, and letting what happens come out of being here for whatever appropriate time that we need to be here. And
I
I think
think
that's
that's
okay.
great. I think that's
Me
great,
too.
Pastor Darren. I think that one of the things that we are attempting to do, as I would agree with your statement and your assessment, is that we're attempting to define with specificity. Dr. Carl Wallace, that's his favorite, one of his favorite words, of specificity. You're attempting to define with specificity what this looks like and what this is going to entail in. How is it going to look? And I think often Jesus talks in being perspectives that don't define things with a goal orientation. And so, like you said, it confuses us. Like they said, we went down there and we found some folks, and they wasn't with us. Well, Jesus didn't say, he said, well, if they ain't against us, I guess they're for us. So leave them alone. Just let them do what they do. He didn't say, well, what we should do is go get them, and then we should get them all educated and oriented to what Christianity. He said, look, they ain't against us. They evidently they're for us. So just let them go ahead and do what they do. And that is not the way American people operate. We got to set it up, chop it up, set it out. Here are the goals. Here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do. As if we can control all of that.
Mm-hmm. What would this question just came to me as and listening to you talk, and you as the founder of this church that is nearing half a century in age. And me and Pastor Madison were talking about this. There's a lot of historical Black churches that might be 100 or so odd years that were started like right after the Emancipation Proclamation. A lot of them you find in the South, but you don't find a lot of them that are in this space where they're 40, 50 years old. And having pastored this church for so long, what would you say to the members to help them process and acclimate in terms of their space in this journey and their part in this journey also?
That's a good question. I think that the church is one of the few places in the African American community where I can find my somebodyness. So it's not just my church and not just the pastor, but we are an organization and an organism and an occasion, an event that is critical to the community. And it is not only my transition, but it is the transition of the entire church that is important, that we are leaving the church in a healthy place with healthy people who are taking it on to the next level. So there's a lot of work that has to be done beside simply what I do or simply what you do. What we do is certainly critical, it's certainly important, but it's an entire organization that needs to be making this transition. For those of you who don't like sports, forgive me, but I mean, if the Cavaliers are going to change or whatever, and they are, I mean, we can't just change the main player and one coach. Mm-hmm. So, well, that's it. We're ready to go now for the next team. There has to be a culture change. There has to be changes to fit new patterns of play and new vision of where we're going to go. So there's a lot of things that are in flux right now that I think causes people some angst and some whatever. Why? Because if you're a stakeholder, you've been around a long time, then you're trying to maintain, let's keep us where we're at. If you're a new person, you're trying to say, well, how do we get to where we want to go? Wherever that is, how do we envision the future? And so it's not either or, but it's both and, as we attempt to do that. And I don't know if I talked about it last time, but it is not baby busters, boomers, and all of that. It's pre-civil rights, post-civil rights, in my opinion. Pre-civil rights is a particular kind of mindset and experience and all that we've been through and whatever. And then post-civil rights is another generation coming on who don't have the experience and the perspective and the aura of Dr. King and all of that. And what I asked us to do in a sermon series maybe about 20 years ago, I don't know how long it was, is that if you're a post-civil rights person, make space for the folks at the table who don't know about civil rights. Let's make room for them so they can get in, and ask the people who are post-civil rights who don't know anything about it, whatever, don't tear down the table when you arrive, because the table means something to the folks who let you in. So don't come in and turn the table up and chop it up. We don't care anything about that, because it is significant to the stakeholders. Let me define that for a minute. Stakeholders are the people who have been here for a long time, who believe that they have invested a certain amount, and therefore they have a stake in what's going to take place. And those stakeholders are important. They have served for years, some of them for 30 plus 40 years. We want to honor them. We want to make sure that they can make a good transition, but they too have to try to fill their spot, bring in new people for training, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it that's important for all of us to get, is that we are all transitioning. It's not you, it's not me, it's not just the two of us, it's all of us. And I think sometimes we lose that reality, that we're actually kind of creating, or to use Margaret Wheatley's terminology, we are co-creating what the household will look like in the future. And that means everybody has a role to play, everybody has a part to play, and it also means everybody is significant and is an important in making that happen.
I like that terminology, co-create. And I think one of the things that we are doing with this conversation is helping people understand where they can get in at, where they can co-create at, what that kind of terminology is bringing up as vocabulary creates culture, and also for them to be able to see not just me and our relationship, but to be able to see you, because they don't know you, so they're not sure. Is Pastor Darren, is he approachable? Is Pastor Darren, will he listen to me? Pastor Darren, does he care about me? Now, they already believe what they believe about me, right or wrong or indifferent. Well, that's just Bishop, whatever it is, we know where he is, and they may not, but they think they do. So our conversation allows you to comment on various things, to hear what I'm saying, to affirm, yes, that's the direction I think. I see it in the same manner, or I see it differently. So people can begin to know who you are as you create, as we co-create, as you carve out your the leadership role and the preaching context that will be your future. Now, a lot of people haven't even thought about that. What do you mean preaching context? That you preach into a context, into a set of people, into the circumstances of those particular people. And I've talked to many a pastor, a young pastor, I preach this out. I preach to them. I'm married, am I buried, am I whatever. Therefore, they're my audience. You preach into that, but they're not your audience. But you are creating an audience. Those 3 months out of the year are creating an audience. And people used to walk up to me when Pastor Butts was alive. Bishop, you're a wonderful man. So glad to have you. Pastor Butts is my pastor. Okay. I have no problem, because we share the pastorate. We share the leadership. I believe the New Testament is about a plurality of leaders. It's not just one leader. Even though one leader stands in a pulpit and gets most of the credit, it is the plurality of leadership. And so that plurality in the Old Testament becomes the same thing in the New Testament when Paul begins to set elders in place. Not just one person, but the eldership that would rule, and rule is a bad word, that would manage and co-create and co-manage with the people that were there. Rule is a word that's held over from how it is that we've perceived leadership, that it is rulership. It's not a rulership. It's an interaction. It is a conversation. It is a family movement. It is just a lot of things.
You know, that really brought up a couple of things. It was I wish I had the book in front of me, because I'm reading some Douglas John Hall, and he was talking about how we get messed up about the word dominion in Genesis 1, and how we see it as like dominate. But if we're to have dominion and we're supposed to represent God in this space, then we're supposed to represent his character in this space, and him being a suffering God, a God that lays down his life, a God that is patient, that is long suffering, and a God that is more about serving and selfless. And as I was reading that this morning, I was thinking about that's pastoring, that's the ministry, like that's the perspective that I need to have. And one of the things that is interesting that I really just kind of thought about also is when me and my wife Elena, when we talk about the church, we actually phrase it in terminology as this is what we're giving our life to. And that's how I view it. That's how my wife views it. As this is not it's not a job. It's not a career choice. This is the people of the house of Lord. We have made a choice that we are giving our lives to them and to this church, and this is what we feel called to do. But that's a very different perspective.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is not the normal perspective. Just for anybody who's listening, this ain't it. This is not the normal perspective. The normal perspective is I'm gonna be the pastor and I'm the leader and I'm over this, and you're gonna do what I say do, and here's the direction that we're gonna go. And that's not the way that I have tried to lead or want to lead. I'm sure that there are personality issues that come out and being a high D that make it seem that way to people, where you do what I say. But I've never used those words or tried to act in that way. So dominion is about when you get to the New Testament, I start to use the term the suffering love of Jesus. I'm going to broach a whole different conversation, just for the sake of opening up ongoing teaching that I'm going to be doing in the future. So how do we get to the suffering love of Jesus Christ from the depiction of God in the Old Testament? So that's the problem. God in the Old Testament is a divine warrior, and he is such because the context of the nations surrounding him are warlike gods. And so in order to demonstrate his sovereignty in the midst of these warlike gods, he shows himself to be a divine warrior. Now, he is not an assertive divine warrior. He doesn't go out and attack anybody. He is not an aggressive divine warrior, but he is an assertive divine warrior. In other words, if you attack his people, then he will respond. But he's not bothering anybody. He's not attacking anybody. He's not aggressive. He tends to be more assertive and more passive in his divine leadership, his divine warriorship. But then when you move, the problem becomes, how do we get from that to the suffering love of Jesus in the New Testament? So that becomes the problem. And then you have all kinds of theological conundrums and people getting rid of the Old Testament and one scholar cutting pieces of it out because it's just a matter of making the transition, how God moved from one to the other. So that dominion, even in the Old Testament where God is a divine warrior, he often is talking about listening, loving, gathering, healing, restoring. These are terms that come up over and over and over, but the ones we tend to latch onto are judgment, holiness, destruction. We tend to latch onto those, even though these others are right there and they occur in the same context and sometimes follow them really in close succession. But as Americans, colonization, power, we have a love of power, but not the power of love. That becomes the problem that we are working our way through so that we can become the loving dispensers of God's love, compassion, all that he is. So that's problematic.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's the one thing. That's why I really like reading Douglas John Hall stuff, because it really kind of brings a different perspective than what you normally get. Because that's really what it is. You know, you gave and you are giving your life to the church, and you're in a season where you're giving your life to help set up the church. And, you know, I see that as you modeling that for me. And that's how I need to approach this in using you as my example.
Well, I appreciate that, Pastor Daren. I'm going to go back for a moment because you sparked something, and I would like to say it so that people can have it for posterity down on the record, so that you know how I see it. Because a lot of times these things are not, they're done in passing. And we talk about them in passing, but we don't really give any solid words to some of that. I made the statement earlier that I'm just, trying to put myself in that financial position for certain. Well, some people would ask the question, I mean, okay, you started late, whatever. Why ain't you in financial position? And I would tell them that at the beginning of the church, I was making 10% of every offering over $100. And there wasn't many over $100. Then we went to, when I was, I had young children and whatever, we went to $21,000 a year. And that included my hospitalization and everything else with 2 children. Okay. And it was tight. That's all I can say. Then we decided, they did a survey. They brought an outside company in. So let's just see, what should we be paying him? And now I was getting some raises along the way, but nothing that could allow me to catch up with the dollars that I'd given up by not being paid what I probably should be paid, then turning down multiple raises because the church is, in my opinion, struggling. So I don't want to take too much, and I'm trying to aid the house of the Lord. So I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years in, they got a company came in, and they made an assessment, and they told the trustees, that's a shame what y'all doing to that guy. That's a shame. They were like, what's wrong? What? He's probably working 70, 80 hours a week, and you're not paying him anything close to what he ought to be making. And so they corrected that. They gave me a significant raise, which I was very thankful for. But then I turned around and gave some of that back. Okay. So over the course of time, not to mention just about 2 years ago, I gave my salary. I took a 20% cut, trying to help the church. So there's no way for me to get back the money that I gave in the dollars of the past, because those past dollars were probably worth more than present dollars. I mean, you've lost interest, you've lost. Okay, there's no way for me to get that back. So when I say, there's some people who hear me and say, well, right now, I'm just putting myself in position. I'm working, I'm collecting a salary. They're like, well, that ain't right. You shouldn't. They don't know the sacrifice that has been made across time, not just for me, but for my wife and my family, in order to make sure that the church has everything it needs.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's time for me to receive, to put back, to get ready for this retirement, because I only got a couple more years or so, and then we will be into it. Whatever I got is what I got, and no way to augment it, or what it'll just be what it is. And I don't say that negatively or begrudgingly or anything else. I'm glad to have done what I did. Mm-hmm. But I'm just telling you the reality. Those are just the realities.
And so much of that, so many people need to hear that that side of the story. And one thing that jumped out to me was the fact that you went, what you said, like 15 years before the company. I mean, so you're well into, over a decade, approaching 2 decades before that even happened. And that speaks to so much. I can't even talk about all that speaks to, but that's something that people need to know. Not just the House of Lord, but even other pastors my age or people in my situation need to understand that there is a season where I think you had to pay your dues, in lack of a better terminology, and no one, you can't skip that. Everybody has to pay their dues, and I think in my generation sometimes we don't want to face that reality.
Yep. That's good stuff. That's good stuff, Pastor Darren. As we start to close, let me say this. I think you hit something so critical. We talk about it. I talk about it a little bit different, but that's exactly where you are. And that is, you have to be able to create some change in your pocket. Mm-hmm. That as you pastor, you begin to gather up some coins because you work with people, you love them, you've interacted with them. And so when you do something that they don't like or whatever, and it costs you 50 cents, well, it's okay. I got some coins here. I can spend that 50 cents and I'm still good. Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't create that kind of change in your pocket, you end up in difficulty because they said it's 50 cents worth and you ain't got but 5 cents. So they're saying, so what you gonna do? Now Bishop, look, now you shouldn't have done that. I said, but don't worry. I mean, I got 50 cents. Pastor Darren, you got about 5 cents. So you have to work and grow and create that change in that currency so that when something happens, it is attributed to your account without you losing any face or whatever, because they know that it's another way of talking about your heart. You've shown your heart in such a way that they know certain things about you and are able to go forward, because we're human. And because we are human, we'll make mistakes. Things will take place, but they don't know our hearts are for their good.
Amen. I think we should just let that be the yes and amen of this conversation, and let's just end on that note right there.
All right. Well, I look forward to the next time.
Absolutely, and thank you, Bishop.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.